So you don't have to worry about your microphones or webcams today. Those are disabled and will remain disabled throughout the session. I'm joined today by one of my fabulous colleagues, Lindsay, and I will go ahead and let Lindsay introduce herself.
Hi there, my name is Lindsay. I am an online event consultant with our online event consultant team here at Zoom. About a year ago, the team was formed, and now we are 25 strong and keep busy every day hosting online events like this. Our goal is to help keep things smooth and provide advice for our Zoom clients as they move their events onto a virtual platform. So today, with talking about hosting online events, we will be focusing specifically on the webinar platform like we're in today. So I will talk to you about Zoom webinars and some of the differences between a webinar and a meeting, how you can have an attendee engagement. As you know, like Vincent said, you are in listen and view only mode, but there are ways to engage your attendees. Event use cases, when my coworker Kara joins, she's on my team, and we'll talk about some of the events we've been hosting over the last year. We'll share some resources and do a live Q&A at the very end as well to answer your questions. So to start, Zoom webinars is something that we like to promote to our clients when they are looking to have a polished presentation, something where attendees do not have cameras, do not talk, and we can push out something that is professional looking, we can control the view, and we can control who is there. So we offer advanced registration with Zoom webinars, and along with that, unique to the webinar is the ability to send reminder and follow-up emails. That means that a day, an hour, or I believe a week ahead of time, you can have those reminder emails go to your registrant group to remind them and send them the link again to join. That is unique to webinar, along with panelist links. When you are hosting a webinar, as the host, you're on the back end, like I am, like Vincent is, and then you also can have your presenters have panelist links. That is how you will have speakers on the back end, like I am today, where I am able to turn on my camera and my microphone and talk to you. These panelist links are unique. They are sent out through our webinar platform and go to whoever you enter that you need on the back end. We also have source tracking links. I haven't used this a whole lot with my clients, but it is a really cool feature where you can follow where registrants are coming from. So you can post these on your social media, for example, and if that is the link that people followed to get to your registration page, it's going to show you that Facebook is what brought in this many people, or whatever other platform you add that tracking link to. Webinars also have a practice session, or a green room like we call it, which is when your panelists and your host can get in ahead of time before you broadcast live. That's when we'll do a tech check. That's when we will review our run of show. That's where we'll get all of our ducks in a row before we go live and start letting in the attendees so that we're sure we're on the same page and ready to go and have a smooth performance. With webinar, you always have the chat box just like you do in a meeting. The unique feature for attendee engagement in a webinar is the Q&A box. That's what you're using today to submit your questions. That is not in our meeting platform, and we will talk a little bit about that in a couple slides, but that is unique to the webinar like today. Webinar allows you to have up to 50,000 attendees, so if you need a larger group, that's when you're going to choose to do our webinar platform. And like we've said a couple times, attendees are in that listen and view only mode. So engaging the attendee is always something that we have to think about when we are moving to virtual events. We want to make sure that, especially in a webinar like this, if they can't have their camera on, so we can't see them and they can't talk, how do we keep their interest? There are things like sharing content. I'm sharing a PowerPoint today. You can share videos. You can share other applications like timers or countdowns. You can share online games. There are a few different ways here that you see on the screen. I won't go into too much detail, but there are several ways to share through our webinar platform. You can also pull from Dropbox like it shows here, or a Google Drive to share documents. One of our favorite ways of engaging attendees in a webinar is using the polling feature. You can put in anything from, why are you here today? What is your weather like? What's your favorite pet? Or you can actually do, like we've done in a few cases, you can do nominations for board members or a president. You can do voting on approving minutes for a meeting. Things like that can all be done through the poll, and then there are reports that we can pull once we close that will show who voted, how they voted, and tally up your answers if you need something official for your records following your event. Like I mentioned, the chat, same as in meeting, but we have it here. The option is, like you see on the screen, you can allow your attendees to chat with no one. That gives them no opportunity to chat. If you need to shut things down, you don't want that distraction, you can turn it off. Or you can turn it so that they can just chat to panelists. That would be us on the back end, in this case, Vincent and myself. If they have questions, if they have tech problems, things like that, if you want them to be able to reach you, you can choose to leave that open. Or like today, we have it open for panelists and attendees, the completely open chat. That means that there are no restrictions. Everyone can see what you're putting in, and your comments are available. Actually, I'm sorry, we do have that turned off. I apologize. All right, next we have the raise hand feature. So you'll probably see on my slide right here at the very bottom on the Zoom toolbar in the black, there's the raise hand logo. That gives your attendees the opportunity to raise their hand. What we'll see is a little hand logo pop up next to their name in the attendee list. That can be used for voting. That can be used to say, who is interested in this? Who wants to see blank? It also can be used to raise their hand if you do want to unmute and allow that participant to speak. So we don't do it very often in large groups like we have today, but it can be done where we can turn on that raise hand feature. We can ask a question and say, does anyone have something to say about that? You can push the raise hand button. It's going to alert us on the back end that you've raised your hand, and then we can choose to allow you to unmute, and that gives you the ability to speak. And then we have the Q&A box, which you're using today. That is a great way to keep conversation in the chat and keep your questions in the Q&A box. And this way, everything is organized for the leaders on the back end so that we can track and monitor what questions have come in, how we want to answer them, and what we're going to say. Some of them, like you see here, your options are to answer live, and that can be clicked to acknowledge, I see your question, I will answer this live, you're going to hear a response. Or we can type an answer, and that can be done publicly or privately. And then along with your Q&A box, we have the options like you see here to allow anonymous questions, meaning that people don't have to have their name associated with their question. And there is a note that I'd like to add that if you do that, when we pull the Q&A report on the back end, you're not going to see who asked it. So if that doesn't matter to you, that's great. If it does, if you want to know who asked the question and how it was responded so you can follow up, then please don't allow anonymous questions. And then you can see, you can allow your attendees to view answered questions only, meaning once you've hit answer live or type answer, then they will see them. Until you answer that question by pushing either of those buttons, these questions will be hidden from your attendees. It's a useful case in the fact that then if you have people just saying thank you or hi, that doesn't need to jumble up your box for your attendees. It's best to just have them, once you're answered, show up. And then we also have a post-event survey that you can trigger to come through the Zoom platform once your webinar ends. Once the webinar ends, the attendees will have a box pop up prompting them to take your survey. We have several app marketplace integrations. You can see them here. I won't go into detail on those, but if you have questions, please let us know. And then hosting like a pro. So my coworker, Kara, is here. I saw her come on camera. Do you want to introduce yourself, Kara?
Hello all, I'm Kara, and I'm on the Zoom online consulting team, as well as Lindsay. Yeah, I can dive into this one if you'd like.
Please.
I also, hosting event like a pro, definitely scheduling a dry run is super important. Put those down, reserve spots on your calendar to go over everything with all of your speakers. Build out and run a show. This is so extremely important to know who is spotlit when, who is sharing content when. Just having a really detailed run of show is so important. And also, when you're creating your webinars, enabling that practice session. So you are in practice mode, kind of like a green room, right when you log in, and then at the top of your screen, you'll be able to see that you can start the webinar, and that's when attendees can come into the event. And it's extremely important to know that the panelist links are individual links. So when you're setting up your webinar for all of your speakers and adding them in, they have an individual link to log in with. So Lindsay and I logged in with panelist link today. They were separate from each other. They're individualized, and you can do that on the back end, and that's super important. I like putting all of my speakers links into a spreadsheet with their name next to it, because we all know a lot of people don't read emails. So you always want to have that link ready so you can just send it to them on the fly. Definitely being hardwired in to your router, or being as close to your router as possible so you can have that good connection, and it just helps with bandwidth purposes. And also just exiting out of everything when you're in your webinar or meeting, that's super important too. Doing tests for audio and video for all your speakers before the webinar begins within that practice session is super important. I always like to have speakers have a good lighting, and either they have their headphones in, like Lindsay does right now, or if you have good audio from your laptop, then you can use that as well, but always just checking that prior. And then minimize that background noise. Like we have virtual backgrounds up, super helpful. So you don't see my guest bedroom. So that's super helpful as well. Or blurring your background out, or having a branded background for your event, I think is super helpful, and adds like an extra branding for your event as well. Use cases. Well, I just got off of it. That's why I'm a little late. I was on a conference where we had a fireside chat where you could spotlight, I know that's our last bullet, but I was spotlighting multiple presenters that were having a conversation around a topic. And they were all, it kind of felt like they were all in the same room, kind of like that image that's on the screen right now. I also have had many of earning calls, whether it's just audio, or we have someone like the CEOs or CFOs come on the screen and do a live Q&A. We've also seen a ton of award ceremonies where you can hand out awards, have your or your award winners on the panelist side, and they're accepting that, so you can spotlight them on the screen, and then you can take them off and then bring up the next person, and that can look really nice. Also last week, I did a 3-day conference where there were 10 different speakers a day, 10 different decks, and just that's where your run of show comes in, where you have everything super organized. You have who's being spotlit when, who's coming on stage when, who's up next, who's on deck, and then what presentations go where. I think it's super important.
I think that, to piggyback off of Kara, we see a lot of these big events. We see a lot of conferences that are multi-day events. We see a lot of moving people. Another option with webinar that we haven't talked about yet is you can move people from the attendee side to the panelist side. So for some of these award shows, our clients will like to have their clients in as an attendee, and then once they're presented with an award, we can promote them to the back end as a panelist, and then they are able to turn on their screen, turn on their microphone, and accept an award, say a few words, and then we move them back. So even though in a meeting format you're able to see everybody and a webinar might seem impersonal, you are able to, with a detailed run of shows so that everyone's on the same page, move people back and forth and still have an organic feel and still feel like a community. I also think it's important to mention that webinars, just like meetings, are secure. We have the same sort of authentication options. We have the option to lock meetings, to remove people. There is not a waiting room for webinar like there is for a meeting. Once you're broadcasting, and we can't go back, but we can remove people and lock meetings if necessary, just like you can in the meeting platform. Let's see, Kara, do you have anything else on the use cases?
Okay. That covers it. Yeah, these are some great resources. I would take a screenshot of this page and use these URL links as you see fit. I mean, these are really great articles in our support center just to help you out setting up your webinar, tips on broadcasting, how to host, best practices. These are some really great tools. So I would take a screenshot of this if y'all have a chance.
Okay. And that's all we have.
I think we're going to do a little live Q&A as well.
Great. So thank you so much. I'm actually grabbing those links. I'm going to paste them in the chat for everyone for those resources. So give me just one moment. We have a few questions, almost 200 so far. So let's go ahead and get those links in the chat for everyone first. I think that's right. There we go. So with as many questions as we have, of course, we won't have time today to answer all your questions, but we're going to answer as many questions as possible. And one of the kind of themes that I'm seeing, there's one regarding breakout rooms and webinars. And so that one I'll just go ahead and address real quickly. That is on the roadmap. I don't have an actual confirmed date yet, but it is on the roadmap and should be out sometime this year. All right, so that will help answer all the breakout room questions. Well, it'll help answer the questions, will there be breakout rooms and webinars? But I did see quite a few questions around a co-host. So if you want to go ahead and kind of dive into that a little bit more, what is a co-host and kind of how do you do it?
Go ahead, Kara.
You can take that away. Co-host. So usually I have someone, one of our clients hosting the event, and I always ask them to pass me co-host. That enables me to share slides. That enables me to spotlight people, to help filter questions, help filter the chat, lower and raise hands, allow people to talk within a webinar. You definitely want to have a co-host with you day of, just to have a second set of hands to help you with the flow of your event. I think it's super important.
And the difference to note is that a co-host has those controls that Kara mentioned. A panelist, if you give them a panelist link and do not promote them to a co-host, they simply have the ability to be on the back end like we are now, turn on their cameras and speak, and then also view the Q&A as they come in that Q&A box.
Another thing to add and piggyback on is the host is the only one that can end the meeting. The co-host cannot. So that's super important. If you're passing co-host to me, I'm not able to end your meeting. I can just leave the meeting.
Great, and just a couple of other things to mention. A co-host does not have to be part of your account, right? You can make anyone in your meeting or webinar a co-host. You cannot pre-assign co-host. That is only done once the meeting or webinar is live or has been launched. And you can have as many co-hosts as you'd like. However, with that being said, I would not recommend doing or having too many co-hosts. Right? Because basically the old expression, right? Too many chefs spoil the soup. So if you have everyone with co-host controls, basically chaos can ensue. So kind of have it to just people that actually truly need those permissions. Okay, we've doubled in questions almost. So that was fun. So I'm just kind of going through here and trying to see if there is kind of a common theme. Give me just a moment here. Actually, I have seen a few questions on the virtual background. So we all here have different virtual backgrounds. So the question is kind of what are some of the best practices around virtual backgrounds? How do you make branded backgrounds and so forth?
That's a good question. Best practices are make sure your computer can support it and be on the most updated version of Zoom to begin with. Those are the two easiest things. And then I would try it out. Some will, depending on your background in general, your lighting, and what you're wearing, some will work better than others. So it is some trial and error in that regard. And then they are never perfect. It's best to choose one that's not busy. And we do have a lot of customers, especially the corporate ones, that like to have branded webinar or virtual backgrounds for their webinars and their presentations. And in that case, you have to create those and then send them to whoever you want to upload them. We cannot, or you cannot, control somebody else's virtual background. That does need to be done by the individual on their own device. I don't know, Kara, if you have anything else to add.
I agree.
Okay. I've also seen some questions that kind of what a panelist can do, and I believe we may have addressed that, but just to kind of reiterate, can a co-host or can a panelist, sorry, not co-host, can a panelist share their screen?
Yes.
If you allow them to. So you'll have to use the up caret when you share your screen to allow those panelists to share. Or maybe it just is the host, but you have to configure your settings prior to letting them share.
Okay, and there are quite a few questions that I'm seeing kind of around the closed captioning live transcription. So if you guys want to kind of expand on that.
Sure. Closed captioning is generally what we like to do is have a third party. It needs to be a third party. It's not something Zoom provides, but closed captioning, that's when you would have a third party log on. We'll provide them with the token once we've started, and then we assign the closed captioner. You can enable that on your account that you want to have that be an option, and then we do that. You do the planning ahead of time with the third party, and then the day of, we provide the credentials once they're on, and we can get that going. Or the host will be the one who does that, I apologize. And there also is the option to allow somebody to type your closed captions. If you want someone who's in the meeting and give them permission to type, you can assign that as well. And I did run across this with a customer today. You are able to send a closed captioner or the closed captioning to a breakout room in a meeting. And this is a little off track, but you can only have one assigned per webinar or meeting. So you cannot assign more than one closed captioner at a time.
That was perfect.
Since we have a second, I'll clarify. With my customer today, they are hosting a large meeting and have breakout rooms, and they wanted closed captioning in all of the breakout rooms. And that is not something that we can currently support. They can choose one of the breakout rooms, or that closed captioner stays in the main room. That's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but.
Okay, thank you. I remember seeing earlier too some questions around source tracking URLs.
And setting this up in the back end. So when you set up your webinar, at the bottom of the screen, it will say source tracking, and you can add in, perfect, thank you. You can add in, like, let's say Facebook or Twitter, or maybe even your actual website.
So you'll see here that it'll tell you the source tracking allows you to see where your registrants are coming from. So that's a big deal for the clients who want to know, especially if they're paying for marketing or advertising, where are those people coming from? Or where are they most successfully sharing registration for their upcoming webinar?
Okay, and while we're here, or did you, please continue.
I was just going to read what it says right there. You can add up to 50 source tracking links. And if you're doing that 50 times, God bless you, that is a lot of information.
And just another thing to note too, on the source tracking links here, when you run your registration reports, it'll show the source name in there as well. So you could very quickly group how many people came in through Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, however it is you're sharing that particular registration link. And then, of course, while we're here, since we have the account up and running, there were questions around the PayPal integration.
Oh. Kara, you can do that one. I have not done PayPal for a while.
You know, I haven't done it for a while either. So Vincent, I'm going to let you do that one.
Okay, no problem. So the first thing when doing the PayPal integration is you will need to go to Account Management and Webinar Settings. And we scroll down a bit, or maybe a little bit more than a bit. And you want to go to registration settings, and you're going to click edit here to basically set up your PayPal account. Now, the first thing to note is the PayPal account that you use is going to be for all the webinars on your account that are going to charge a registration fee. So you'll probably want to set up more like a corporate PayPal account rather than a personal PayPal account, unless it's just you, of course. Now, when you schedule your webinar, right, we're going to go ahead and schedule a new webinar here. Oops, PayPal webinar. Okay, it does require registration. And we're just going to go ahead and click schedule. Now that I've scheduled the webinar, I can come down here under invitations, registration settings, and click on edit. And then here I'll have the option now to charge a registration fee through PayPal. Okay, I can charge the amount I'd like. I can select the currency from the ones available here. We'll stick with US dollars. And note, when you do use PayPal, right, because this is a native integration, it is going to automatically restrict the number of registrants on your webinar based on its capacity. So I have a webinar 500 on this account. It automatically restricts it to 500 registrants. Okay, now let's go ahead and save that. We're going to copy that. We now see that this has a registration fee of $1, and then pay to register, it will take me to PayPal to finish the transaction. And once the transaction is complete, as a registrant, I will receive my registration confirmation email. All right, so that is the PayPal integration. There's a quick question that it's a fun one for me. So do I play keyboards? Because if you look behind me, wait, where is it? There are some keyboards in my background, but that is a virtual background. But I picked it because, yes, I play keyboards, or at least I used to, till the arthritis kicked in. Okay, let's see here. Oh, we're up, we've almost more than tripled. There was a question on the live transcription about disabling the captions, right? So some people don't like the subtitles on their screen, others do. If you're connected today through a mobile device, you are unable to turn off the transcription. However, if you join from a desktop client, if you click the live transcript button, you get a menu that will tell you to either hide or show the subtitle. So if the subtitles are showing, the option you will receive is hide the subtitle, and you'll want to select that. Okay, let's see some other questions here.
We'll see one
So
that I've seen quite a bit about allowing an attendee to speak and then turning on their video. So you are not allowed to turn on an attendee video unless you promote them over to a panelist. So if you do not want to promote them as a panelist, then you cannot turn their video on. You can only allow them to speak.
And on speaking, there are some questions regarding the headsets that we're all using. So if we just want to kind of go round robin and talk about that, go for it.
Sure. I have the Plantronics BT600, and it's just connected via Bluetooth, and I think it's great. And if you can hear me okay, then I guess it's pretty good.
And I'm not using a headset, but I do have a Jabra, I think it's like 360. I don't know, it's about to pop up.
It's just a speakerphone kind of thing?
Yep, using just my laptop.
Okay, and I have a Logitech H570E, and I have a wired headset, and of course I go up on this topic a lot. I prefer wired headsets. One, it gives me a control right here to mute and unmute myself. And also a wired headset is going to give you slightly better sound because it has to do less compression on the audio signal because it doesn't have to transmit wirelessly. However, if you move a lot, you may not want a wired headset because trust me, there are plenty of times where I basically cleared my desk because I forgot that I still had my headset on, stand up, walk away, and then just wipe everything off my desk. So
that is why I don't plug mine in. Yep.
no, I'm not like the Juggernaut. I mean, I can be stopped when I move, but I'm just so like, oh, I gotta go, and then I don't get yanked back. I'm taking everything with me. Okay, let's see here. Oh, there's also a question regarding the panelist links, right? Because when you invite a panelist, they get a unique link. So where can they find that?
Where can you find the link or adding a panelist? Once you add a panelist, those links will be, yep. Once you add them, the link is emailed directly to them. So that's helpful. You also can look it up. So right here, Vincent is showing you how you add a panelist. You need their name.
But not how to type.
Not how to type. You'll need their name. That name, how you type it in, is what will show up when they join your webinar as a panelist. And then an email. And then right here, before he hits save, yep, you're able to check or uncheck send invitation to all newly added panelists immediately. I usually leave it on. If you choose not to, you'll just need to make sure you go back and send it to them later. And then you hit save. You now have Vincent as a panelist. And right there, if you open it, you can always go back and copy his invitation and send it to him directly. If he loses his link, if he loses his email, or if you chose not to have it send automatically, you can go in and copy it this way.
And then just one thing to add to that, when you invite your panelists, you can invite more than one, which you can have, the number of panelists you can have is dependent on your meeting capacity. Just throw that out there. But make sure that you instruct your panelists to not share their links, right? So if a panelist shares their link and they've already joined and now someone else joins with their link, bad things happen. It's like crossing the streams in Ghostbusters. Okay, let's see here. We've got still a ton of questions. Let's see here.
Hey, Vincent, I'll jump in here just on audio.
Yes,
folks,
please,
I sent a bunch of links in the chat panel, so it sounds like a bunch of you need some actual, like, more advanced training where, like, this is how you schedule. This is, kind of more of a step-by-step. If you look in your chat panel, there's a link to the live training webinars, and we have one that actually is for, I think it's like, I guess there's two parts, right, Vincent?
Yes.
One's is like scheduling, I guess, basically getting ready for your webinar. I forget what the title is. And then the other one is actually hosting the webinar. So there's
yeah, recorded planning stuff. And then hosting.
Planning, so there you go.
Also, at this point, let's go ahead and real quickly cover our support page because it's a wonderful resource. Once you're logged into your Zoom portal, you can go ahead and click on support in the upper right-hand corner. This will take you to our support page. Okay, at the bottom of the page, or any Zoom page really, under support, you will see the link to live training. And I can't see where that link went. There we go. All right, so if you want to learn more about the Zoom products, we have detailed training sessions here for Zoom meetings. And then here's webinars. Part one covers basically kind of what we just did. We scheduled a webinar, talked about the various tabs of invitations, email settings, branding, and so forth. And then part two will walk you through the host controls. So you've launched your webinar, now what do you do? You can attend the public training sessions as often as you'd like, and they are always free. The other thing that you can do from the Help Center here, let's come back up to the top, that is to search for keywords, right? So you have a search bar here. Let's say you want to learn more about that PayPal integration. Type in PayPal. We're going to suggest the top articles, and there we go. Configuring Zoom webinars with PayPal. The support articles will have overviews to kind of give you an idea of what that feature or setting is. Prerequisites, so what do you have to have in order to use that particular feature? And then, of course, step-by-step instructions. Okay, there was a request for this link, so we're going to go ahead and put that in the chat for everyone. So that was convenient that I picked that particular topic. Let's see here. There is some questions here regarding the panelists turning on their videos and why would they not be able to turn on their videos?
There is an option when you're setting up your webinar to have panelist videos not be on, or to turn off their ability to turn on videos. And there are a couple reasons. You might want someone back there as a panelist to be able to share their screen and share a presentation, or because you want them to talk, but they're in an area that isn't great for the visual or have their camera on. So there are several reasons like that that you might want someone on the back end to help with planning or help with just running the show, but maybe you want to make sure they don't accidentally turn on their camera and interrupt things.
And also, just to piggyback that, if they are joining late to the webinar and you are already live and they're joining 30 minutes after, then you would want their video to be turned off and for them to be muted as well, so they're not interrupting the speaker that is speaking at that time.
And like Vincent is showing here, this is where you would choose when you're setting up your webinar to have a host and or panelist enter with their video off. It helps keep things clean. If you do this though, then on the live event, once you start it, if you change your mind or if you want them to come in off, but then we need to let them turn their cameras on later, you do have the option to allow attendee or per panelist to start their video.
And then one other comment on that is note as the host or co-host, if you stop someone's video camera, you actually go into your participant list, click their name, more, stop video, they will not be permitted to turn their video back on. So it's kind of an ultimate sort of emergency brake, like that's it, your video's off until I say so. And then you would have the option to go back in and say, ask them to start their video. You can't start it for them, but you can ask them to start it. And you will require that ask in order for them to turn on their videos if you, the host or co-host, has turned off that webcam. And there have been a few questions around on-demand webinars. You want to go ahead and talk about that?
Meaning recording and playing them back on demand or live streaming?
I believe
Not
it's
quite sure.
the specific on-demand feature.
Oh. Oh, can you answer that one? Do you mind? I haven't worked with that.
Oh, yeah, sure. So when you're scheduling the webinar like we have here, I can make the webinar on demand. And when I do that, it's going to automatically select another option. If I select it, there we go, which is to automatically record the webinar in the cloud. Right? So making the webinar itself on demand here, all it's really doing is forcing that option or automatically checking the option to automatically record. Now, once your webinar is done and the recording is available, that recording becomes on demand, right? So that means that in order for someone to watch the recording, they need to register. Even if they registered for the main event and they were there, they'll still need to register to view the recording. Now, maybe you forgot to select on demand for a webinar. That's okay. Also, one thing to note here before I move on, if you automatically record a webinar in the cloud and you have the practice session, it will not automatically record the practice session. It will not begin recording until you click broadcast. All right, so we've got it automatically recording. We didn't mark it on demand. That's okay, because you can always come back here to your recordings. And you see that little icon right there? Well, that's probably a little too much. A little kind of a TV icon. That means that recording was marked for on demand. So I can go into any of these recordings. I see all my files here. I can click on share and say, view the recording on demand. So now registration will be required. And then here is where I can select my registration settings. So I could have a different registration form. Right, with the questions that we have, you can use questions as well as custom questions. And then you'll be able to view your registrants as to see who watched the recording. And that is the on-demand option. Let's see, trying to find some additional kind of common theme questions here. There was a question on, can panelists use external cameras? I've seen a couple questions on that.
I'm using an external camera now, a Logitech camera, but I have plugged into my laptop. I think it works great. And also my laptop camera works great as well. You can use your laptop camera and your mic to be a panelist as well.
One thing to note, if you are going to use your built-in camera on your laptop, you want to keep that camera at eye level as much as possible. So you want to probably put something to raise it up a bit, like, you know, if you still have phone books, that would work, maybe a shelf or something like that. Because if you have your laptop on your desk and you need to view the screen, so you tilt it back a little bit, well, now where's the camera pointed? Right. So probably don't want to have people reviewing up your nostrils, unless of course that's the effect you're going for. So you'll raise it up so that it's at eye level, and then always of course adjust for lighting.
That's why it's super important to do a practice session and do those checks, so you know where your camera is and you're looking good for your event and for your audience.
Someone just said that talking about phone books, like I'm basically showing my age, and yes, I'm old. Okay, let's see. We got, well, now we're over 500 questions. Okay, does Zoom have tips for panelists to prepare? And I would say probably the kind of the tips to prepare, not just for panelists, it's for anyone that's going to be involved in, if you will, the production of your webinar. So take it away.
Yes, we do. We always will suggest that you are on the latest and greatest version of Zoom, that you have either hardwired into your internet or you are as close to that wireless router box as you can be, that you have any unnecessary applications on your computer closed, that you are able to the best of your ability, limit background noise, and to help with a smooth run of show, it definitely is beneficial to get on early and test your technology. Make sure that your headset or whatever you're going to be using to talk and listen is working, and that your camera and green screen or background or however you would like them to look. Those are some quick and easy prep. Do you have other things you like to add, Kara?
Having a rehearsal, that is super important, and you can prep your panelists there. I think that's just so important to have that before going live, even if you can have a one-on-one time with panelists, just so you can go over those things with them as well.
Okay, great. Well, I believe that is all the time we have today. So once again, just thank you so much to everyone for joining. I hope we got as many questions answered as possible. Oh, I know we got as many answered as possible, but as I mentioned, there are a lot of questions. Feel free to join our live training sessions where you can get help, also get your questions answered. And as a reminder, today's session is being recorded, so that will be sent out later. You'll get a link to the recording. And I just want to say thank you so much to my colleagues, Lindsay and Kara.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.